students, today's agenda is to check homework. We'll be graphing sine and cosine, and you will be able to do 10.7. Today, students will be able to graph sine and cosine functions. This is the unit circle that we filled out in the first 3 lessons of this unit. Remember that at the end of the video, you can find the entire playlist where you see step by step how to fill it out, how to use it, how to find this. And for the sine and cosine, it's actually directly, as if you recall from previous lessons, it's directly in the coordinates that we wrote down or filled out in our unit circle. Remember that the x is your cosine and the sine will be your y value of those coordinates. And so for the f of x equals sine of x is just the graph of sine. And so what we're going to do is just have some values for x, and these are related to the radians that we learned already what that means. Remember that in each circle there are 6.28 about of radians, meaning radiuses around the circle. And so that's what the values for x are going to be, the measurements in radians. And so when we have 0 radians, the sine, remember that the sine is always the y value. And so for 0, it's going to be 0. Okay, for pi over 2 is right here, pi over 2. The sign for that is going to be 1. And let me tell you that we could also include sine of pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3 if we wanted, but it's just like working with decimals. Okay, it's like working with decimals and you're going to get a value right in between instead of whole numbers. So we're just focusing on values that are easier to graph. Okay, so sine of pi, well, pi is right here. The sine is the y value, which is 0. For the next one is 3/2 of pi, or 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2 is right here. Again, the sign is not, the first one is cosine, so we're going to go to the sign, which is -1. Then 2 pi radians is right here, which is, again, is 0. 5 pi over 2 or 5, it's like going all over again. You have all 4 of them, and then 5 would be one more half of a pi. Okay, so it's going to be here. So again, 5 pi over 2 or 5/2 of pi is like saying 1/2, 2/2, 3/2, 4/2, 5/2. You're going around the circle all over again, basically. And so again, he goes to the sign, which is the second value. It's 1. 6/2 of pi, 6 divided by 2 is 3 pi. So it's right here, and it's 0. For 7/2 of pi, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is the same as 3/2 of pi. So that's going to be -1. Okay, and so now that we have the values for x and y, we're ready to graph, so we can just put that to the side. And so for the first value, we have 0, 0. 0, 0 is just the origin, so it's right there. It stays in its place. The next value is pi over 2, which is the same thing as 1/2 of pi. That's for x. For y is 1. The next one is pi 0. So pi 0. It's right here. The next one is 3/2 of pi, or 3 pi over 2, which is the same thing. And the y value is -1. So 3/2 of pi, -1 for the y. 2 pi x, but for y is 0. 5/2 of pi, or 5 pi over 2. The y is 1, so it's right here, 1. 3 pi, that's 0. 3 pi is 0. And 7/2 of pi, it's right there, but for y is -1, so you go down. If you notice, it goes 0, +1, 0, -1, 0, +1, 0, -1, and the next one is going to be 0, right? That's the pattern. So now what you're going to do is you're going to do a curve in here, and for me it's easier to come down from the higher point, so I just go kind of round like this to make it as nice as I can. Not perfect because it's not easy. And then you go like this. Then from this one I just graph it from the vertex, from the highest or lowest points. It's easier for me that way, but you might find a different way to do it. There you have it, more or less. Not perfect, but that's your f of x equals sine. So this is the sine function being graphed, okay? And again, you do need to have your unit circle to make your lives easier. Before we move to the cosine, there are a couple of things that I would like to share with you that are going to be very helpful when we go to the transformations. So let me see if I can. This is going to be your midline, which is the center of that graph, okay? Midline. Then from that midline to the highest point of your graph, that's going to be the amplitude. Okay, so amplitude. Okay, so from here to here, that's the amplitude. One other thing that you need to know, whenever it repeats again, so if you notice it goes up, down, up, then that's a whole period, and that period repeats. So up, down, up. That's another period. So the period is how long does it take to do a whole repetition kind of thing, okay? So it's going to be from here to here. That's one period. Okay, so the midline, the amplitude from the midline to the top, and the period. And this will be helpful when we do transformations of the graphs of trigonometric functions. Okay, so let's go to cosine. Cosine, not sine. Okay, now let's graph the function of cosine. And again, the cosine value are going to be your x values, okay? And for 0, if there are 0 radians, then the cosine will be 1. For pi over 2 is right here. The cosine is 0. And again, if you need to know how to get to these values, make sure you watch the other videos, okay? Pi is right here. The cosine is -1. For 3/2 of pi, or 3 pi over 2, is right here. The cosine is 0. For 2 pi is over here. Cosine is 1. And if you saw a pattern in the other one is 1, 0, -1, 0, 1, it's probably going to be 0, -1, 0. Okay, but let's continue doing filling it out so that we can see. Remember that 5/2 of pi is like going 1, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, and 4 halves is the same as 2 whole. 5 halves, so that's 0. 3 pi is the same as 6 halves of pi. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 1/2, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, 5 halves, 6 halves. So that's going to be -1. And 7 halves, it's going to be 0. And again, the 7 is because each fourth of the whole circle is half of pi. Okay, so now that we have the values, we can say thank you to the unit circle. And now let's graph this. 0, 1, 0, 1. It's right here. Half of pi is 0, so half of pi, or 1, or pi over 2, 0 for y, so it stays there. For pi, you have -1, so you go down here for y. 3/2 of pi, the value of y is 0. 2 pi, the y value is 1. 5/2 of pi, the value is 0. 3 pi, the value is -1. And 7/2 of pi, the value is 0. And again, you can continue. The pattern is the same, so the next one is going to be up here, okay? And again, for the graph, all you have to do, go from the top or lowest points and just go, it's not sharp, it's kind of roundish. Whoops. Something like that. Try your best, please, with these graphs. Don't turn in just anything. Some people just go, they make a line and it's not a line, okay? And I know ours are not perfect, but we're trying our best. So try your best as well. So this is going to be your cosine of x. Okay, then do the next one. And then this one. Again, it's, for me, it's easier to just start from the highest or lowest point, make it a little roundish, and then just go towards the other point. And then you can just make it a little more beautiful. You're beautiful, that's how I see. Okay, and so these are the two graphs, the function of cosine, the function of sine, and now you can go and do your own. But before you do that, if you can just share with us a thumbs up, you can subscribe around here. The whole playlist for this unit with all the details of how to fill your unit circle, how to use it, where do these values come from, it's going to be around here. You can find the next video around here. So subscribe, share, and thank you so much. Now you're able to do 10.7 and have fun.